This is Krista Michener. Welcome back to Made to Be Whole. This week we're going to be talking about holidays, the stress that can come with it, and how to manage your health and your expectations during the holidays. Made to Be Whole is intended for informational purposes only. It's not intended to replace the advice or care of a licensed healthcare professional. Participating in this podcast does not constitute a provider-patient relationship with Krista Michener, AHP Integrative Health, or any of the guests featured on Made to Be Whole. Krista Michener, AHP Integrative Health, and any featured guests aren't responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from use of information obtained in this podcast or associated materials. Please consult a healthcare professional for any health-related concerns that you are experiencing. We're going to come at the holidays from the perspective of our 4 pillars of healing. We all know that when someone has an illness of any kind or a chronic infection, which I deal a lot with, the added stress and expectations that sometimes surround holidays can cause flares of illness, can cause increased fatigue. The immune system gets worn down. People aren't sleeping as much. They're not eating as well. They're traveling. They're exposed to more stuff, more bugs, and they tend to get worn down, and a season that should be joyful and restorative is a drain for a lot of people. But I don't think that has to be. And a lot of that has to do with the self care that we provide, how we prioritize that, and managing expectations with yourself and with others. So, the first eye, the illness or the infection, a lot of things can get derailed just by stress. We know that blood sugar can be adversely affected by stress, blood pressure. Certainly, anyone with any sort of autoimmune disorder or infection, when the body's under stress, resources are diverted to manage that and people flare. You can't avoid all stress, but I really, really firmly believe that we can be more mindful of how we spend our time and we can let go of some self imposed expectations and maybe some expectations that others have. But is it really a benefit to your family or your loved ones if you do all the traditions and you have all this stuff, but you're miserable and tired or yelling at other people because you can't do it and you just need them to do more because their memories aren't going to be of your beautiful centerpieces or whatever you're hanging your hat on, it's gonna be of the tension. That's not what you want. You wanna remember relationships. So, what things are really important? What are at the core of what makes the holidays special for you? One thing that is a good example that seems like a selfless thing, but I think can become self-serving and draining is gift giving. I mean, it's kind of insane if you think about, especially when my kids were young. So, you're supposed to have a gift for what the babysitter, the bus driver, the person at aftercare, the dentist, the teacher, the aide, the I mean, it's just insane. As the daughter of an elementary school principal, I will tell you, it was great as a kid because my dad would come home with this haul because of all these people who felt like they needed to feed their principal and give him treats at the holidays. It was awesome for us, but my mom, who was an elementary school teacher before she stayed home with us, she said and she was single at the time, she said it was too much. People would bring her all of these treats and things, and it was just more than she can manage. And I think one of the best things you can do if there are people that you really want to honor and remember is gratitude. What I would try to do instead, especially when my kids were younger and in school, was take the time to just write a note to thank them for what they do. And if there's too much going on to make a special Christmas note, do it another time. Gratitude doesn't wear out. There are very few people that you're giving these things to who literally have nobody in their lives. You're not giving the only gift the bus driver is going to give. Your hairdresser will have a Merry Christmas if you don't give her a gift card. You're putting way too much on yourself. You're kind of inflating your importance a little, and you need to let it go. And even when it comes to family, I actually have, and I might have this number wrong, 33 nieces and nephews. And for a long time, because I loved doing it, I would get gifts for everyone. And they weren't big or fancy, and it wasn't an expectation, but it just made me happy. But after we got our son first as a foster child and then adopt, the level of care that demanded of me and the difficulty getting out, it just wasn't something I could realistically do. And it makes me a little sad, but guess what? My nieces and nephews still have a Merry Christmas. They have parents who love them. I'm not the most important person in the world, and the only person you're probably the most important in the world to, you know who that is. So focus on those relationships and let go of appearances and expectations. Insane expectations that I drove me nuts when my kids were in elementary school, the room parties they would have and what they wanted parents to do. When I was a kid, I know this is like the uphill both ways to school, but I remember having a party in 2nd grade, and they handed out popsicles, and we were all so happy, and that was it. The end. Like, we probably played some games. When my youngest one was in elementary school, I had signed up to bring a, quote, "healthy snack" for the Halloween party, and it wasn't okay for me to just send a healthy snack. They sent me a template of how I was supposed to take little straight pretzels and make them into I was supposed to use pencils and put the pretzels in bags so it was like a broomstick and, like, detailed directions of how it was supposed to look. That's craziness. It's absolute craziness. The kids don't care. So if there are things that you're doing because you think they're cute, they're wonderful, you're making memories, I just encourage you to step back and assess and say, "Who is this really for? Who is it helping? And am I hurting or neglecting anyone by being caught up in the thick of thin things?" Manage expectations. Number 2 would be inflammation. I think the biggest threat to that during the holiday season is added sugar in our diet. Sugar is pretty pro-inflammatory. Now, the holidays are delicious, and I am not suggesting that anyone forego their pumpkin pie or peppermint ice cream or whatever it else that brings you joy, but you can manage this and mitigate the risk by doing a couple of different things. So, I was talking to my son Daniel about this last night. We pulled out what's called the glycemic index, which I really recommend that you check out. So, the glycemic index is a scoring tool that basically helps you figure out how different foods affect your blood sugar. So, foods that are lower in glycemic index, what you're going to have is a lower increase of blood sugar and a more sustained increase, and then it'll drop gradually, but it won't crash. Foods that are high in glycemic index, your sugar spikes and then it crashes. And how that affects your energy is when you've got a whole bunch of sugar coming in, then your body produces more insulin to manage it. And then things drop and you actually hypoglycemic and you can be more fatigued and more anxious. Low blood sugar and really fluctuating blood sugar really can cause a presentation of anxiety for some people, but also lots of sugar is pro inflammatory. Daniel and I were talking through what this means. And I said, listen, this isn't all or nothing. This isn't saying don't eat mashed potatoes at Thanksgiving, but this is saying, all right, let's look at the low glycemic index foods that are on the table. Let's fill your plate up with that and then have a small to moderate proportion of the things that can really jack with your blood sugar. You know, meat, low glycemic index. Actually, healthy fats are low glycemic index. A lot of your non-starchy vegetables, low glycemic index. Even things like beans, like black beans, pinto beans, they're on the lower end. Generally, what's going to help prevent the spikes and the crashes are foods that are not just low in sugar, but higher in protein, higher in fiber, higher in fat. And so you're also doing yourself a favor if even if you're going to have that pumpkin pie, don't say, "Oh, I've got to wait and save my calories for the pie and I'm not going to eat." No, eat a balanced meal. Make sure you get your fat and your protein and your fiber in there. And then when you have that piece of pie, you're going to mitigate the risk of having a massive spike and then a crash. So all the treats on an empty stomach, not a great idea. Um, And allow yourself to feel joy and do those things, but just be aware of how sugar can affect you and why it can be associated with fatigue, brain fog, some of those things. Another little warning tidbit about artificial sweeteners. I remember I used to hear people say, "Oh, diet soda is just as bad for you, your sugar, as regular soda." And I thought that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't have sugar in it. It's not going to spike it. But here's what it does do. No, it's not going to raise your blood sugar. But when your tongue gets the sensation of sweet, all those taste buds we learned about in elementary school, that your nervous system signals to your body that there's sugar coming. So your pancreas dumps a bunch of insulin out to take care of the threat that they think is coming. So you can still develop insulin resistance and you can actually have lows and have your blood sugar drop when it shouldn't by having artificial sweeteners. So it's something to be aware of. And I also think there can be a real impact for some people just symptom-wise with artificial sweeteners, artificial colors. Little personal story on this, I was never a soda drinker, and then with my last pregnancy, I was thirsty constantly, and I really think I had gestational diabetes that didn't show up in the initial testing, but I was just thirsty all the time. So that was the year that McDonald's came out with a dollar every size for the drink. So I started drinking the diet lemonade all the time because I was so thirsty, and then they stopped carrying diet lemonade, so I got into diet soda. And I eventually stopped the diet soda because I realized it was really affecting my gut, and I thought, "Oh, it's the caffeine." But then fast forward several years, one of my patients has said, and I'm a little dumb, but they said, "Oh, Celsius, it's a really healthy energy drink." And I looked at it, I'm like, "Oh, there's not a lot of sugar, a lot of artificial stuff." I didn't recognize there were like 200 milligrams of caffeine, and I'm kind of caffeine naive. But I got one, I drank it, and my husband pointed out how much caffeine there was, and I realized this is not causing a headache. It is not upsetting my gut. I really think what was doing that was the artificial sweeteners and the artificial colors in the diet soda. Be aware of that. I have an acquaintance who told me recently they realized that for their kids, the artificial colors really caused a lot of dysregulation. And I think sometimes it's hard because we don't wanna be that person who's afraid of everything and, that person who tells you we've all been around the people who can tell you how bad everything you're doing is for you. I saw a little cartoon recently that kind of cracked me up. This little kid was sitting with their dad and said, "Dad, how do I know if someone's a vegan?" And dad said, "Don't worry, they'll let you know." Kind of that camp. And I have relatives who are vegans who I love and appreciate, but you don't want to be that person who's like, "Oh my gosh, the world's toxic." But there is a lot of stuff in the world that does increase the toxic load and can impact your health. So do some experimentation, see what affects you. It's not a matter of this is good, this is bad. It's, is this good for my body? And for me, Diet Dr. Pepper isn't, even though it's delicious and I loved it. I had to let it go because it wasn't good for my body. So sugar, artificial sweeteners, all of those things can adversely affect your blood sugar and contribute to lows, which can make you cranky and tired. So just allow yourself treats, but don't binge. Make sure you're filling up on healthy foods first. And then not only will you be less likely to have the spikes and the drops, you will also be less likely to overeat. That would be my little tidbit about inflammation. As I thought about what the biggest threat to immune function is over the holidays with the stress that comes, I really think sleep deprivation is the biggest one. Because of all of these expectations that are created, we get far less sleep than we should. And it's actually the time of year when our body's asking for more sleep. I think that ways you can take care of that on your end, part of it is realistic expectations for yourself, prioritizing self-care, but then also back to we talked about at the beginning, saying no to things. It's so nice that everyone wants to have a party and an event, but you can completely wear yourself out At my office, what we started doing last year, we have our work party in January because we figure everybody's already doing other things with their families in December, and I don't want to add more stress. Uh, Also, depending on what your weakness is, mine has never been wanting things to be wrapped perfectly. But if you're that person, do you really need to do that? My husband's family had a tradition that we collaborated with Santa and made this the tradition in our house too, that the presents from Santa don't get wrapped. They would just be in a little pile next to the stocking. And sometimes Santa asked parents to help with the wrapping, so that helped our sleep too. As far as all of the stuff that's out there that you can do that's good for the world, it doesn't all have to be done in December. That would just be my advice. Having a child who was in foster care and then watching all the things people do out of the goodness of their hearts, but I think also to feel good about themselves. Oh, we need to do all of these things to make sure these foster kids have an amazing Christmas and they get all these presents because their life's so hard. They don't care about stuff. They care about permanent, and I can tell you that my son probably had a lot of great Christmases where lots of people donated gifts, and he still went from home to home, and when we had him, he didn't have any of that, and he wasn't attached to anything. So if you really wanna do something for the foster children in your community, do it some other time. Or if it's really important to you to do things for people for Christmas, why don't you do them at the beginning of the year, get them ready, and then you can donate in December and be done and focus on the things that matter most. Sleep is just critical, 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 and you are worth it. I've mentioned before, we know what our children are like when they don't sleep, and really we're the same. We may hold it together a little better. I know some people who don't, but it just has the same impact. If you don't eat right, if you don't sleep right, you're going to be grouchy, you're not going to be productive, and you're not going to be able to enjoy the people in your life, which should be the focus of the holiday season. The last pillar of healing we have is integrity. So, how does that apply to the holiday season? So, I think if we go back to these other things we've talked about, a lot of it comes back to being honest. So, first of all, being honest with yourself, what you'd like to do versus what you have to give. You've gotta be honest with yourself, and then you have to be honest with other people too. Most people are gonna be okay. You really and I mean, this is terrible, but I don't think you're really as important as you think you are. You are as, like, a human being, you have that value, but sometimes we think like with the hairdresser and the bus driver, that what we do is so important. And it's really not. It's important that we're kind to people. It's important that we're gracious, but we really are not the person who's going to make or break somebody's holiday or life, unless we're going to be a jerk, be abusive, those sorts of things. So be honest with other people. One way I've done this Thanksgiving, this episode's going to come out after Thanksgiving, but I have large family of my own. We have some family coming in from out of town. We have some elderly family members who can't do everything they used to. And I realized that making Thanksgiving dinner would fall mostly on me and that I would be miserable. And I'm not even very good at it. And I just ordered it all. And everyone is going to be okay because we're there for family. And if they're not okay, they're welcome to go somewhere else next year because I'm not willing to sacrifice my holiday and my sanity to meet an expectation that I've thrust upon myself. And honestly, when I think of last year's Thanksgiving, I don't remember the specific food or how it tasted, but I did remember that I was able to get all 6 kids to come with us in the evening to go see a movie, and it's really hard to get all 6 kids together. It's a lot harder to do some of those things when you're completely exhausted because you haven't slept, because you've been up cooking for days and weeks and you got out the china and now you have to wash it all by hand and all of that. And if those things bring you joy, that's fine. But if you're doing it to meet a false expectation, I would really recommend letting it go. In terms of treatment for our health and how that can affect us during the holidays, I frequently, because of the impact treatment can have on people's health, that's difficult. I try to avoid starting new things right around the holidays. So, in the context of the vector-borne infections we've discussed, new treatments sometimes cause that die-off or Herxheimer reaction, which make you feel worse before you feel better. So, I always tell my patients, we're going to take it slow. I don't see any reason to start something new or be aggressive around the holidays unless you have a party you want to get out of. But other than that, just go ahead, take it easy, enjoy the people in your life. You've got 11 other months of the year to hit it harder. There's a time and a season for everything, and 1 month of less aggressive care is not going to negatively impact your trajectory. So this is a short episode. I just wanted to give you some basic tips about how to stay well during the holidays and encourage you to value yourself, to value your health. Your body is a gift, but you're the only one that's really equipped to take care of it. And like we know with cars and machinery, anything we want to last a long time and work well for a long time requires maintenance. So don't abandon that part of your life during the holiday season. Remember to always have hope because you were made to be whole. Thank you for spending time with me today. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to be notified when new episodes release. And remember, you were made to be whole. Have a podcast question or suggestion? Text or call us on the podcast info line at 330 439 0686.